I'll extend my talking about managing and monitoring the suppliers and vendor and procurement relationship. Suppliers and vendor relationship is crucial for the project success. A well-managed relationship ensures that a timely deliveries, compliance with the contracts, and high-quality performance. Strong communication and structured performance monitoring help maintaining the alignment with the project goals. Concepts that we are going to cover here, including the importance of the suppliers and vendor relationship management when doing is resolving the dispute proactively to prevent project delays and cost overruns. Also, we'll talk about the effective communication and performance tracking ensures the contract compliance. And to start with the performance measurement, as we already have discussed some of these KPIs and techniques to measure to measure the performance of the vendors' deliveries and the performance. So the performance measurement techniques like KPIs and SLA that the vendors deliver as per the expectation. Tracking delivery rates, defects percentages, also like some of these cost adherence help the project managers to identify the issues early and take corrective action. Some of these key metrics or KPIs that can be used to measure the vendor performance include KPIs like measures the vendor efficiency, the cost, and the quality of the deliverables. SLAs or the service level agreement, very critical concept where it defines the minimum performance expectation. It's especially used when you are dealing with an IT or software or infrastructure project where you have a service level agreement that the vendor or maintains service level, for example, up to 99 or as per the requirements, there are critical system which goes up to 99.9%, like the banking. We already have this, we already have also this metric, which is the defect rate in software solutions and infrastructure. Measures the quality of the delivered goods or services, mainly used in software and IT project, but also it can be used in other, say, solutions where you measure the defect rate per month, quarter. We also have on-time delivery rate. On-time delivery rate, it tracks the adherence to the agreed what else we have? We have the cost variance and the schedule variance again. So here we talked about on-time delivery. You can here also track schedule variance, where to ensure the schedule remains within the, say, or the delivery remains project schedule. Cost variance here, it ensures the expenses or track the expenses and ensures that all of the project expenses budget. Let's take a real world example here. What is a software vendor um, was evaluated using an SLA that mandated 99.9 system uptime, ensuring of these services for the users. When we talk about monitoring and managing these vendor KPIs, how you manage these KPIs, how you monitor them. So tracking these KPIs help the project manager to maintain vendor accountability, uh, drive continuous improvement by conducting a regular performance review, by conducting a periodic evaluations based on the agreed metrics. What else we have? Also by conducting regular performance reviews and leveraging these scorecards, project teams can ensure the supplier constant the project needs. And these scorecards and dashboard, it uses the data to visualize, let's say, the project facts, the project, say, timelines, costs. It's like using the data visualization to track project progress. Also have benchmarking, and benchmarking can be used to compare vendor performance against industry standards or comparing other vendors with each of their service level. Also, one of these important, let's say, concept here where you need to take a corrective action. So, based on your regular review, based on the data, dashboards, and based on the benchmark, started finding, let's say, flaws or negative points that the supplier or the vendor has in order to say to meet the service level. So, and this action will ensures that the your plans or your improvement plan with maintaining these vendor relationship have a corrective action. These corrective action plans addresses the underperformance issues that was found before that impacted the project. Now it's the time for the vendor supplier to this corrective action to resolve these under. When it comes to handle these contract dispute conflicts, we already have discussed that in the session when we talked about some of these common causes of the vendor dispute, being the missed deadlines. Missed deadlines is very critical when there are late deliveries that disrupt the project schedule or the project cost. Common also the second common cause here we have when we have a vendor dispute quality. Quality issue is like the delivered goods or services does not meet quality expectations or the agreed upon quality requirement. We also have the scope disagreement. Scope disagreement is like misalignment in expectation. You were expecting the vendor to propose something or solve something, deliver something, and deliver something else. That is where you have a strong, let's say, communication, strong requirements gathering, and strong expectation of being on the scope and also, one of these common causes of the vendor dispute is payment dispute. Payment dispute is like late or incorrect invoicing, and that will cause, let's say, some dissatisfaction between vendor in case you as a project managers had delayed vendor payments in case if that met the delivery, let's say, timelines, the cost, and achieve the quality, also achieve the customer, the customers or the stakeholder satisfaction with, but you still, let's say, delay or hold the vendor or supplier invoices. So these are the common causes of dispute. How now to resolve these vendor dispute? First, you need to have strong negotiation skill. By negotiation, it can be like direct discussion to align the expectation, to ensure that the vendor or the supplier has, say, accountability and responsibility, full responsibility. For example, delivering the scope where he has agreed with and the contract has agreed. Next, we have contract review. And contract review is by ensuring that both of the parties understand the obligation, terms, conditions, penalties. Also, we talked last session about alternative dispute, which is ADR. ADR is like mediation or creation of complex disputes. Finally, it's we have here one of these methods. It's called the legal action. And legal action, it's last resort for the case if the resolution is not possible. In case that you vendor has, let's say, reached into a level of disagreement that it couldn't be resolved by the contract or by, let's say, negotiation or, let's say, one of these other techniques to resolve these disputes, and it's out of control. Now it's the time to go for the action. But we always prefer to keep the last resort. There is issue resolution is not possible. Again, these contract dispute can delays the project and reduce the cost and cause the stakeholders to be not satisfied. So all of these structured approaches, we've talked about these root causes, starting with these methods to resolve these vendor dispute by initiation and contract review. or escalating it to the legal action or alternative dispute resolution that ensures that these conflicts are resolved efficiently and professionally. What else we have? We have communication strategies or an effective, let's say, communication strategies to handle these. Good communication is the foundation of successful vendor. Regular meetings and transparent documentation, structured feedback loops helps keeping the expectation aligned and prevent these conflicts. And this effective communication, again, it includes having a clear contract terms to ensure all of the expectations are documented, having a regular status or a regular status meeting, keep the communication lines open. What else we have? We have centralized documentation. It's like storing all of these contract invoices and corresponding for easy reference. It's like a repository for all of these documentations and contract. It allows an easy access and retrieval for the project managers and the stakeholder in case if they. Finally, one of these effective communication technique which I use personally is feedback loops, and by providing these vendors with the performance insights, let's say motivation and appreciation for all of these efforts, it helps to have these effective, let's say, relationship between stakeholders or the vendors. Contract termination and closeout procedures. So this is something that it was one of these outputs of the controlling procurement process. You remember that when we were talking about these outputs of the controlling the was close procurement. Before we proceed with closing with the procurement, let's first understand the contract termination and closeout procedures. So the reasons for a contract termination first is that the project has been completed or the project completion. And that means the contract is fulfilled successfully. In case that you have, let's say, one of these vendor performance issues where the vendor isn't able to meet all of these requirements and it kept, let's say, continuously impacting the project timeline budget, now it's the time to let's say, to terminate the project. We call this as performance failure, where the vendor fails to meet the agreed terms. One of these reasons for the contract termination is legal or compliance issues. It means the vendor has breached or let's say break down the contract or regulatory violations. By conducting these regulatory violations, you as a project manager, you have a very huge risk that you can, let's say, be responsible for in case if this vendor or supplier has breached the contract. So we call this as a legal or compliance issue for one of these reasons. What else we have? We have also mutual agreement. Mutual agreement, it's one of these also reasons where you and the vendor or both of the parties decided to end the contract early. It's maybe the let's say the direction or the strategic direction of the organization, both of the organization has changed, and then there is a mutual agreement between both of the let's say the organization or the stakeholders and the vendor to end this relationship. And now let's talk about closing this contract, or what are the steps, proper steps to close out these contracts. First, you need to start with final performance evaluation. Final performance evaluation, it's made a step to ensure all of the deliverables are received as per the contract. You also need to ensure as second step that the issue resolution, as there's no any pending issues or let's say risks that are still open that is related to the procurement or the contract. So by resolving any outstanding dispute, you complete the second step by ensuring that there is always an issue resolution to any open, let's say, issues or disputes. Thirdly, you need to ensure final payment processing. And That is to ensure all of the invoices are settled between you and the vendor. Fourth is the documentation archival. Documentation archival is like storing all of these procurement records, contracts, whatever, let's say contracts, SLAs, let's say documentations that is related to the deliverable itself. It's by storing all of these records for future references and audits. Proper contract closeout ensures that all of the terms are met and dispute and resolved and all of the documentation is finalized. By preventing or by following all of these steps that we already have talked about, it prevents the future legal implications and ensures smooth vendor transitions. Now let's talk about the vendor exit strategies and transition planning. So vendor transitions should be planned strategically to minimize the risks. First thing is effective knowledge transfer. And the first step here we have to follow is having a knowledge transfer between you and the vendor. To ensure, like, knowledge transfer is a step where to ensure a smooth handover of the ongoing work to your operation team or to your project team. Next step here you have is you need to have a data and asset retrieval. And by collecting all of the project related data from the vendors, you ensure that you have an efficient data and asset retrieval. Next, you need to have an effective stakeholder communication by informing all of the relevant parties of the vendor changes, let's say the closeout processes, in case if any of these stakeholder has any concern that it needs to be raised by, let's say with the vendor, it needs to happen immediately. So you need to keep the stakeholder, let's say, engagement and communication by informing all of these stakeholders that the vendor relationship is gonna end for whatever reason, whether it's the deliverables were met by the vendor, or maybe the vendor has legal implications. So all of these, let's say, implications need to be resolved immediately. And one of these also important step is the risk mitigation by having a contingency plan in place for unexpected vendor exits. And when we talked about always having a contingency plan by, let's say, looking for an alternative vendors or suppliers who can supply you or, let's say, procure you all of these required, let's say, deliverables that you and the current vendor is working on. So it's important to have all of these contingency plan or exit strategy with any of the vendors to ensure that you have a plan B. Vendor transition should be planned again strategically to minimize these risks. And again, when we talked about having an effective knowledge transfer and data retrieval and stakeholder coordination, it prevents the disruptions and maintain the project. How to audit the vendor performance to ensure a continuous improvement. Vendor audit helps the organization to maintain a high performance and compliance with the standards or the compliance standards. By regularly reviewing the vendor adherence, enhances the procurement efficiency and strengthening the long-term relationships. And let's look at one of these types of the vendor audits where you have process audits. And process audits, it's like ensuring the adherence to the procurement procedures, let's say. Also have compliance audits. Compliance audits, it's made or conducted to verify the legal and regulatory alignment. Maybe one of your projects is a financial project where it needs to receive all of these regulatory, let's say, approval, let's say the data approval or the data security regulatory approval like the GDPR or let's say the other regulations in case if that you are running a financial project. We also have financial audits, and financial audits is by reviewing the pricing accuracy and invoice integrity. What are these benefits for having a regular vendor audits? Some of these benefits includes like it identifies the performance gaps and ensures having corrective actions to resolve these gaps. One of other benefits here we have is it strengthening the compliance and risk mitigation by showing the vendors that you are having continuous compliance audits, financial audits, process audits. It shows that you have, let's say, a strong, uh, let's say, management over all of these relationships with all of these voicing, regulatory alignment, and the procurement processes. So again, it's strengthening the compliance and risk mitigation. And finally, also it helps in future vendor selection decisions. Now let's look at one of these case studies where we have a well-defined or a managed supplier relationship in a construction project. Let's say there's a scenario where a construction project has faced repeated vendor delays. You as a project manager has implemented this performance-based contract with penalty clauses where you shift the responsibility of delays on the vendor or the supplier. So when you implemented this performance-based contract with penalty clauses, and you have introduced a real-time KPI tracking for supplier accountability, you showed that the supplier or the vendor, you as a product manager has full awareness of how to apply these penalties. You have asked the vendor or the supplier to have a real-time KPIs to ensure that the supplier knows that you're tracking this closely. By that, it has achieved 25% reduction schedule delays after these changes that you have implemented. This case study shows how proactive vendor management works and performance-based contract has helped a construction project to improve the efficiency and reduce the delivery delays. And to summarize our takeaways on managing the suppliers and vendor relationships, we talked about monitoring the vendor performance using KPIs, SLAs to ensure the vendor or supplier accountability. We also looked at this effective dispute resolution to prevent the project delays, and we looked at the root causes that you might face when handling any procurement disputes. We also covered the contract closeout procedures and maybe, let's say, reasons and closeout procedures or steps to formalize the vendor relationships. Finally, we talked about the vendor audits to ensure having or to drive these continuous improvement during the procurement of the or the project procurement process.